Okay, I had a few people ask me to please do a review, and so I thought this would be a good time to show you where I actually did a review before you asked, and I'll pull it up right here. When you see things in bold, you need to pay attention. This is a shorter version of what you find in your book. So when you see things that are in bold, chances are that's going to be on the exam. So you've got a lot of your information right here in these slideshows. If you would just read through them several times and study them. But remember, your part is to read and study, read and study, read and study. So I've condensed the information as much as I can, but here is something that you need to know for the exam. All the information when I wrote this based on the exam. I had the exam open when I was doing this. So most of this is some of the key answers that you will find on the exam. So these words that are in bold, you need to know, but you also need to read the area around it. So it's not enough just to memorize the word. You need to understand what it means and what you can apply it to. So here we go again. So these images were chosen carefully along with the videos so you could watch and learn. Here we have the palace here. Remember, a palace is nothing more than a very big house. Usually we associate palaces with royalty, which is fine because most of the time it's the royalty that can afford a big home like this. But of course, this one focuses on the one in Spain. So of course, if it's up here, it's kind of important and you need to know it for the exam. So this is some of the stuff that you'll see, like the Tugra here for Suleiman. What he was a great patron to the arts. So the horsetail you might see. Enamel. The Mamluks were a group of, they descended from slaves in Egypt, so they're very proud of their heritage and they're known for these beautiful lamps. And they usually put enamel on these glass lamps, so that requires another firing. Enamel requires baking and heat, just like glaze from ceramics needs. Carpet making, very important, but probably isn't going to be on the exam. We will talk quite a bit about books. Remember, the idea and the concept of aniconism is no figures in art, so they do these plant motifs in arabesque. However, if it's not related to the religion, they do have a lot of great stories. And not all Muslims believe in aniconism. So, and when we go to parts of India, like the Mughals, which are in India, you will see figures in the art. If they wondered why that is, well, it's because not all Muslims believe on the same things. Just like today, not all Muslims, just like Christians, not all Christians agree on things. They agree on the major parts of the religion, but little details like figurative work and art, they might disagree on. And of course, one of the things that is important about modern Islamic art, this is actually in Rome, is of course that has both ancient and modern elements in it. So read these slides very carefully. Let's look at chapter 9 now. In chapter 9, of course, we continue on with Islamic art. This is chapter 8. I'll move over here, lesson units. Remember, you need to click on the units to make sure that you go through things. When we get to the final unit, I will open all the slideshows so you can see them. Not all the quizzes, but I'll put in a review for the final quiz too. So here we go again. Here are some of your answers right here in bold. Yeah, just read and memorize, read and memorize. I am telling you the answers if you read and memorize. So here we go with the Taj Mahal. There's an Iwan right in front with the Taj Mahal. Very neat, cool entrance there. And of course, Hinduism is also in India. When the Mughals, this was the group that ruled over, the Muslim group that ruled over India for many centuries. They tolerated Hinduism and Buddhism, and they were allowed to build temples in the southern regions, and then the northern regions is where we get all the Islamic art and architecture and the mosque. So Hinduism, Buddhism comes from Hinduism. Hinduism started as a polytheistic religion, and some Hindus still worship one or two gods. A lot of Hindus, especially here in America, encompass all the gods into one major god, and they talk about the different gods and goddesses as being many aspects of that one god. So different variations of Hinduism, and Buddhism came from Hinduism. Of course, then we talk more about the Mughal art. Or the Rajputs were a group of warrior clans in India, and they have basically Hindu themes, but they would also do manuscripts for the Mughal. So they would do Islamic themes too, but for the exam, know that you can see the Hinduism here in this. So Rajputs, very important style of art. And of course, they used gouache paints, which were opaque watercolors. India is known for their pigments. And Angkor Wat is in Cambodia. Huge site. When it was right around the 12th century was when it was big and growing. And of course, the successful king commissioned all this here. They called it the axis of the world at that time. I've seen several people repeat that in this class in the discussion area, which is good. That might be on the exam. And you remember, we know the difference between a Bodhisattva and a Buddha. It has to do with the princely clothes here. That shows his otherworldliness. And of course, a monk would be in basic robes. We move on to China, which of course China adopted Buddhism from India as it traveled along the Silk Road by the merchants. We talk about the literati. Now remember, three major religions in China: Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. They combine these to be a Neo-Confucius movement, but you can be just a Buddhist or just a Taoist in China. Taoism is the native religion to China, the most ancient, and then along comes Confucius, who influences them and has a major impact on Chinese religion. And it was the literati that are known for their very almost monochromatic, but you have color in there, usually the color of the rice paper. But they used India ink, and they created these beautiful hanging and hand scrolls. They were encouraged to write calligraphy and poetry and develop paintings around them, because in China they believe the arts help develop your brain, your mind. So the finest minds in China, which were the literati, the scholars that worked for the Chinese government, were encouraged to do calligraphy, poetry, and painting in their spare time. And of course, we see this in all the art. You can see the influence of Taoism on the landscapes here. As we scroll along, the famous Ming vase, the most expensive vase in the world, because the Chinese are known for their porcelain, which is why we say stuff like the China cabinet or the good China. We're honoring the Chinese for bringing us the finest porcelain in the world. I put a little bit about dragons, the Chinese symbol there, since we have a dragon on one of these vessels here. Lots of interesting stories behind the dragon. The Forbidden City is important. Look, there's something in bold. Maybe you need to know it. The Forbidden City, of course, goes all the way back to ancient China, but it was rebuilt during the Ming Dynasty. So the Forbidden City was, of course, where the government officials resided. And, of course, it's known for this unique style here. Korea. Korea is a very creative culture. The Koreans are very creative. They even invented their own color called grayish, this grayish green colors called celadon. And they had all kinds of inventions, but this poor country has been war ravaged for centuries. They were invaded by the Mongolians, and then, of course, the Japanese invaded them, and then, of course, here the United States comes along and tries to try to get rid of the communism over there. So, whenever you see Korea in the news today, remember their background. This is an incredibly creative culture that is in a war-ravaged territory. So it's kind of amazing that they could create such great art, considering the circumstances and the tough war is tough on the people. Yeah, the people in a country. Moving on to Japan. Japan and Korea both adopted the Chinese education system. They used Chinese scripts, Chinese calligraphy until about the 15th century. And then they started developing their own writing styles. So, of course, three major writing styles in Japan. One for the men who actually could afford to go to China and get an education. And then the women's script is much more artsy. We get our very first Japanese novel around this time. Here is a 31-line poem in the Japanese script. And it's known for its beautiful asymmetrical design on handmade papers. Asymmetrical meaning it's balanced informally. You don't have something on this side and something on this side. It's balanced diagonally. So it's kind of an informal balance, and very beautiful. But there's flecks of gold in this. In Japan, of course, Zen Buddhism. Zen means mind. So in China, it was called Chan. It's mental cultivation of your mind. So they practice mindfulness. And of course, this is one of the most famous Zen gardens in the world. And the rock garden at Ryonoji. Ryoonji. And it's known for its just empty severity. It's severely nothing in it. And they go out there and they weed this garden to keep the emptiness. This is supposed to be mental clarity. So when you rake the rocks and weed the garden, you're practicing mindfulness and focusing your mind. So watch the video on Ryonoji and read this part. You will see it on the exam. You will also see the incredible shoin design, which is made up of these beautiful tatami floor mats and fusama sliding doors. Some of the Japanese artists specialize in painting sliding doors. And Japan, of course, is based on 4 major islands. So Japan has major population issues. Tokyo is one of the largest cities in the world, if not the largest city in the world. So they have a serious space problem. So they're very inventive with their interiors and their architecture. So they can take an entire room and build it into all kinds of tiny little rooms with these Fusama sliding doors, or they can make it into a huge space. And so they make use of all of their space in Japan. They must, because of the overcrowdedness. They're known for raku firing, which is a high firing way of firing clay. And you can easily make a kiln with like a trash can and a blowtorch. I did this when I was younger. It's a quick firing system, but that also means that the clay can crack and break. You get these beautiful bubbles and this very iridescent look to it that occurs because of the blowtorch they use. But this primitive style of firing is very unique to raku firing. So raku firing is very in demand. And they treasure these little teacups that they carry around with them. The tea ceremony in Japan is considered a medicinal ceremony. So there is all kinds of, and they're not wrong about that, there is all kinds of medicinal effects of drinking tea. So there are onto something there. So a little bit about the customs in Japan. And woodblock printing, know how the woodblock print is made, with a major key block, which is where you put your black on. So each color has a different block, and then the key block is the final one where you print the black outlines on and cover up all your mistakes or any of the other misalignment with the other colors. So also know that the major theme at this time, mass-produced wood blocks or wood prints. Woodblock prints are actors and courtesans. Yeah, kabuki theater is very popular at this time, so they had major actors. These men played both the male and female role, and they taught Buddhist principles through kabuki theater. Very popular. The Great Wave is probably the finest example of a woodblock print, and Hokusai is highly internationally known. Unfortunately, he died before he got to see how famous he was going to become. But when the Japanese borders were forced open, when America is invited over there during the Japanese Civil War, then we get to see Japanese art. The rest of the world moved on to color lithography, but the Japanese were still doing these woodblock prints. So they had some of the most unique art in the world because of their isolationism from the rest. And Japanesimi, the Japanese craze, all things Japanese, took off at this time, and everybody wanted Japanese art. So I'm going to end this video here to keep them short, and chapters 10 and 11 will be in a separate video. This is the review for exam 3.